Here are 10 flawless rock albums from the 1970s that never got the recognition they deserved. While the decade gave us legendary records from Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and The Who, it also produced overlooked masterpieces that were either too ahead of their time, too experimental for mainstream tastes, or simply victims of bad timing and poor promotion. The 1970s truly stand as the golden era for the rock album. Record labels, flush with success, often granted bands unprecedented creative freedom, budget, and time to stretch out and explore ambitious concepts. This led to a boom in inventive, long-form musical exploration, where album artwork and thematic coherence were as vital as the music itself. Let's start with Big Star's Radio City from 1974. This Memphis power pop masterpiece sold fewer than 10,000 copies upon release, yet it now sits on Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums of all time. The band's previous album was literally called #1 Record and also bombed commercially, creating one of rock's most ironic band names. The album was recorded at Memphis's Ardent Studios and featured striking cover art by William Eggleston, who would later become a world-renowned photographer. But the music inside truly mattered most. REM's Mike Mills perfectly captured its appeal. A band who had gotten it right, who made records that sounded like rock and roll bands should sound, a band who wrote all the songs, from flat-out rockers to achingly beautiful ballads that were still somehow rock songs. Big Star became the quintessential American power pop band, influencing everyone from REM to the Replacements, who famously penned a song called Alex Chilton in tribute to the band's leader. Had they emerged in the 1960s, they might have rivaled the Byrds or Buffalo Springfield. Instead, they found themselves terribly out of time as a brilliant pop band at odds with the glam and bluesy rock of the early 70s. Moving into deeper experimental territory, we find Funkadelic's Maggot Brain from 1971. This album showcases what happens when creative genius meets complete artistic freedom. The title track alone justifies its inclusion here. A 10-minute guitar solo recorded in one take that Rolling Stone ranked as the 60th greatest guitar song of all time. The story behind this epic track is legendary. George Clinton, under the influence of LSD, told guitarist Eddie Hazel to play as if he had just been told his mother was dead. Clinton later described the moment. I knew immediately that he understood what I meant. I could see the guitar notes stretching out like a silver web. When he played the solo back, I knew that it was good beyond good. Not only a virtuoso display of musicianship, but also an almost unprecedented moment of emotion in pop music. Though other musicians performed on the track, Clinton faded them out of the final mix, so the focus would remain on Hazel's transcendent guitar work. Music critic Greg Tate described Maggot Brain as Funkadelic's A Love Supreme, while Red Hot Chili Peppers bassist Flea declared that Eddie Hazel is right up there with Jimi Hendrix. Gene Clark's No Other from 1974 represents the most tragic case of an album being completely misunderstood in its time. Clark, formerly of the Byrds, spent over $100,000 making this record, an enormous sum for 1974. Critics attacked its lavish arrangements, gospel choirs, and orchestral flourishes as indulgent and pretentious. Asylum Records barely promoted it, and by 1976 had deleted it from their catalog. The album peaked at a disappointing number 144 on the Billboard charts. Clark never fully recovered from its commercial failure, but the story doesn't end there. In the early 2000s, No Other was reissued to positive critical reappraisal. Publications began calling it a lost masterpiece and one of the greatest albums ever made. The album's reputation grew to such heights that when Clark passed away in 1991, the words "No Other" were added to his headstone. In 2014, members of Beach House formed the Gene Clark No Other Band, with musicians from Fleet Foxes, Grizzly Bear, and the Walkmen for a 4-concert tour where they performed the entire album. This tribute speaks to the record's delayed but profound impact on subsequent generations of musicians. Shuggie Otis's Inspiration Information from 1974 showcases the work of a true musical prodigy operating completely on his own terms. Otis wrote and arranged every song, playing virtually every instrument except horns and some strings. His utilization of analog drum machines gave the album a futuristic electric sound that few of his contemporaries were exploring. The album represented Otis's debut as both an adult and a producer, having been backed on his previous efforts by his father, R&B pioneer Johnny Otis. But creative freedom came with career consequences. After the album's release, Billy Preston approached Otis on behalf of the Rolling Stones, asking him to join their upcoming world tour. Otis declined. He also turned down the chance to have Quincy Jones produce his next album. After a series of similar refusals, his recording contract was canceled. The album was mostly forgotten until it was re-released in 2001 by Luaka Bop, which received widespread acclaim and introduced Otis's visionary work to a new generation. Pitchfork rated the title track as the 149th best song of the 1970s, recognizing its ahead-of-its-time innovation. Heart's Dreamboat Annie, from 1976, tells one of rock's great Cinderella stories. Originally issued by the tiny Canadian label Mushroom Records, after major labels inexplicably passed on it, the album became a massive success despite the odds. Released in Canada in September 1975 and in the United States in February 1976, it reached number 7 on the Billboard 200 and spawned 2 top 40 singles, Magic Man at number 9 and Crazy on You at number 35. Heart was a unicorn in the late 70s, one of the very few female-led bands that seized a place in male-dominated AOR radio. But their success came with challenges. Mushroom Records ran a controversial full-page ad in Rolling Stone featuring the Wilson sisters with the caption, "It was only their first time," in a tasteless attempt to characterize Ann and Nancy as lesbian lovers. When a radio promoter later asked Ann about her lover, referring to Nancy, the encounter infuriated her. She went back to her hotel and wrote the words to what became one of Heart's signature songs, Barracuda. As Soundgarden's Chris Cornell noted when inducting Heart into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2013, the sisters blasted down any sexist barriers in front of them, armed with the pure, ballsy power of rock and roll. Van der Graaf Generator's Pawn Hearts from 1971 stands as one of progressive rock's most uncompromising statements. Unlike the symphonic polish of contemporaries like Yes or Genesis, this album embraces dissonance, existential dread, and Peter Hamill's anguished vocals. The centerpiece is a plague of lighthouse keepers, a sprawling 23-minute fever dream of shifting moods and sonic experimentation that remains a singular achievement in progressive rock. These albums share common threads beyond their underrated status. They represent artists pushing boundaries, taking creative risks, and following their artistic vision regardless of commercial considerations. Some were casualties of poor timing, others victims of inadequate promotion or distribution. Many confused audiences by heading in unexpected directions from their previous work. What unites them all is depth, daring, and intrigue that far exceeds their reputations. They remind us that rock history contains countless hidden treasures, Albums that may not have conquered the charts, but conquered the hearts and minds of musicians and deep listeners who recognized their true worth. These 10 albums prove that sometimes the most rewarding musical experiences come from the records that slipped through the cracks, waiting patiently to be rediscovered by those willing to dig deeper into rock's rich history. In an era when algorithms often determine what we hear, these overlooked masterpieces remind us of the value of musical exploration and the lasting power of artistic vision over commercial calculation.